This is another classic story within the Chronicles of Narnia. Its nautical focus is a great change within the series, and it also introduces great characters to the narrative in general. The end of the world is a classic motif, of course, but here it shines. So I will go over some of the highlights and why I like it so much. So stay tuned. Welcome to biblioCultist, where I review books that I find interesting in the topics of religion, philosophy, history, and fiction. Please remember, subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications, like the video, share the video, comment on the video. If you do any of these things, even if it's just one, it really helps the channel, so I appreciate it. I'm going to put my X account where you can suggest some books, and also I'm going to put my Ko-Fi account on the side here so that you can check out my merch store and drop a tip if you like what I'm doing. In this episode, I'm going over The Voyage of the Dawn Treader by C.S. Lewis, and obviously it's part of the Chronicles of Narnia. This edition is from HarperCollins 2007. I got it in a box set. You can get it however you wish, because you can find box sets of soft covers or just buy them independently, however you wish. So every novel in the Chronicles of Narnia usually has some kind of gateway story attached to it, a way that people enter into Narnia. So the entry in this particular story is so epic that it is unforgettable. The notion of paintings coming alive I have seen throughout modern literature, but like I discussed in my review of the Castle of Otranto, which you can find in my playlist, in which I discussed the first Gothic novel ever, the one that Lewis uses here is quite impressive and a lot more memorable for sure. Now, of course, I love the idea of a transformation into a dragon. It's also beautiful because of how he doesn't allow it to be simply an external curse that turns the boy, but his own greed, utilizing the dragon's mythos as a vehicle to teach a few critical lessons on the nature of human beings and how you can be ambitious, but once it goes too far, it can become perverse and actually drag you to the pits of hell. And I think modern culture is so obsessed with celebrities and material possessions that they associate gold and wealth and diamonds and ostentation as a sign of success or of happiness. Now, most of the people that live in that kind of environment tend to be miserable. Of course, there are many other reasons that they would be, but there's a key component in a personality that only focuses on that as a measure of their life. And I'm not saying money is evil or wealth is evil at all. I am simply saying that if that is your calculation to the exclusion of other things, you will have a horrible life, and life is very short. Of course, Aslan is always peeking around the corner in these novels, and of course he becomes the savior of the dragon. And he is the one that takes Eustace away from the condition that placed them in that horrible dynamic. Now, of course, in this story, the character that is turned or cursed is able to become a better person and transform himself internally into something else, so that the misfortune becomes a fortune. But of course, the lesson is not that you should just do evil and you can reform later on, which is a mood I've seen lately to justify really bad behavior. I've actually even seen people argue that if you don't do 50 pounds of cocaine and sexually exploit yourself and others for at least a decade, you haven't lived. And of course, after a decade, you should reform yourself and be a nice person and say, hey, I lived and I learned, and then somehow that justifies every evil that you've done or every bad decision. It's almost like they're advocating for the bad decision. But I would say the people that come out on the other end well are an exception. Therefore, the better move is not to engage in that behavior to begin with. And anyone that has kids would know that this would be the better advice than just saying, hey, go and become the mule of a cartel and at least you can travel. And then after a decade or so, you can reform yourself. I mean, this would be absurd. read a good book about the topic and forget about getting those types of experiences. Now, there's a great scene in the book that involves a sorcerer and a book of spells that is incredible, and it is also the kind of scene that you never forget. So I'm going to read a quote from it. Quote, "It was a large room with 3 big windows, and it was lined from floor to ceiling with books. More books than Lucy had ever seen before. Tiny little books, fat and dumpy books, and books bigger than any church Bible you have ever seen. All bound in leather and smelling old and learned and magical. But she knew from her instructions that she need not bother about any of these, for the book, the magic book, was lying on a reading desk in the very middle of the room. She saw she wouldn't have to read it standing, and anyway, there were no chairs, and also that she would have to stand with her back to the door while she read it. So at once she turned to shut the door. It wouldn't shut." So that's a nice little quote just because of the scene. And of course, for all of us that adore books, this would be a perfect room for any of us. And I myself long to create a room like this, to eventually have a space that resemble this kind of mood. Now, of course, these days, most books don't resemble in any way that style, and trying to replicate it would sacrifice the content for the appearance. So I won't focus so much on the look of the books as much as the content of them, but a nice big room full of books is quite a magical thing to have, and it should be aspired by all thinking people. It is like a collection of souls, of minds in your wall that you can have access to. It is a very powerful thing to have. Now, I have mentioned before the greatness of the character of Reepicheep. And in the following quote, we see Lewis placing all of the chivalry that he can muster and placing them on him. And like I've mentioned before, I think he does this because he is trying to communicate that these types of personalities can be grown and nurtured in any person, including those that feel small or feel less than so. So here's the quote. Reepicheep continued, quote, "If I were addressing peasants or slaves," he said, "I might suppose that this suggestion proceeded from cowardice. But I hope it will never be told in Narnia that a company of noble and royal persons in the flower of their age turned tail because they were afraid of the dark. But what manner of use would it be plowing through blackness?" asked Drinian. "Use," replied Reepicheep. "Use, Captain? If by use you mean filling our bellies or our purses, I confess it will be no use at all. So far as I know, we did not set sail to look for things useful, but to seek honor and adventure. And here is as great an adventure as ever I heard of. If we turn back, no little impeachment of all our honors." So, obviously, very classic chivalrous mood, and he's connecting practicality with a lower character. People that only do things that are useful or pragmatic are missing out on something higher, on the metaphysics of war, the magic in adventure, something that fills the soul and it guides us towards a real purpose, something higher, the truth, God. So again, this is why I love these books, because they do contain a lot of classic tradition that I think should be inculcated into children. Values that are beyond the immediate satisfaction towards a higher goal. And once you teach a child to diffuse immediate sense gratification for the purpose of a higher purpose, a higher course, you have built character in a child. And we all need it, for sure. It's difficult not to be contaminated by this rabid inclination towards self-aggrandizement at the behest of our media and consumer culture. So always remember, you can check out the full series as I go through it in my playlist under Chronicles of Narnia, and I think you will reap plenty of benefits from reading this entire series if you haven't yet. If you have, rereading these books is always refreshing. So hopefully you enjoy this short review. Please remember, subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications, like the video, share the video, comment on the video. Thank you for being with me. See you next time.